and that time it was all booze, everything. He goes, he said, they all have a full head of hair. And he started to look around. They did. They had a full head of hair. You look at the drug dealers and the ones that are on, they're losing their hair. Difference between booze, is it scientific? I don't know. But this guy had been riding the wagon for 20 years. And he knew them all. He said, but so physiology there at play? I don't know, chemistry at play?
Well, let me ask, Rob, you live around the corner, and Mission Local has been sending reporters out every day, not just to be in the plaza, but to walk through the alleys. And you've lived there for some time. You've lived in the city for close to 20 years. Tell me a bit about the conditions in the alleys when you moved here 5 odd years ago, and how things have progressed or maybe regressed.
Yeah, so it feels like there's been phases. I moved here in 2020 to around the corner, and at that point it was pandemic, and so there was tents everywhere, just like there was anywhere else in the city. We moved from about a quarter mile away, so we were very familiar with the area, and we lived in Soma for 10 years, so we were very familiar with just sort of the same types of things we see around here. And so when we saw the tents, we were like, well, this is a pandemic, and also like we lived in Soma for 10 years, and we understand what this is like. And we also thought at the time, because of the way the tents were distributed all over the city, because of the pandemic and people needing to be somewhere in the city having, the options they had to help shelter people during a shelter-in-place event, that we figured there was some solution coming. Maybe that was stupid, naive at the time, looking back at it, but we figured like this can't go on. We can't allow this many people to just be in tents everywhere. But that never really changed in this part of the city, from my experience at least. Driving around, of course, I think you started to see various places that were affected be cleaned up, or whatever term you want to use for it, and then it seemed like there was more consolidation of people here. And then, in my experience, after Grant's past ruling by the Supreme Court, when the city started to enforce the tent situation, we got to find out what everybody was doing in the tents, as if we maybe didn't already know, but it turns out everybody was just doing drugs in the tents all the time. And so the drug use became more visible at that point when people were on the streets. They had to, because I think for, I guess, depending on how you want to judge success, the city did a good job of removing tents. Whether that's good or bad is a different question, but they removed most of the tents. What that left is a bunch of people without any shelter, the same addictions, same problems, except now it's out in the open.
Now this sounds intuitive, but I've talked to people within the city who did not see this coming. Who specifically did not see this coming within the mayor's office, the health department, that if you took away people's tents, you'd be confronted with antisocial behavior right in front of you. This did not occur to people. So in retrospect, it sounds very intuitive, but I can tell you that at the highest level, this was not foreseen. So I'm glad you brought that up. I don't want to say, unfortunately, and I did think about this, we do not have a homeless person on the panel. But I would like to ask you, what is it like to live in one of these alleys that have increasingly been the focus of drug use and people who are, having problems, for lack of a better term?
I have 2 kids and a wife, so we all live together around the corner, and so that, there's my personal experience of this every day, and then there's my wife's personal experience of it as a woman, and then there's my kids' personal experiences of it as 2 kids, 8 and 13. And so I think we all have different ways of viewing the situation, contextualizing it, intellectualizing it, understanding it. And my wife, who's a trauma therapist, is, thankfully well prepared to give me better tools, because my intuitions aren't always so good. But together we work to help keep our kids in a place where they understand what's going on, and hopefully with as little trauma as possible. But I guess I find in this situation, I sound crazy the more I talk. I sound crazy to myself, and I think my friends think I'm crazy. And I find that it's easier to get across the experience of living here by anecdotes. And so last night, we talked yesterday, and after we talked, something like we talked about yesterday happened again. So we're in the front room, the living room, which looks out onto the street, and we're on the first floor. We're playing Rummy Cube, the 4 of us. It's a wholesome family activity. We also hear, and my kids know what this is, lighters constantly going off because there's people cooking drugs right underneath my window. And my kids know, and they hear those noises, they get activated, they have their feelings about it. And my wife and I are like, hopefully they can't hear it, but we know we can all hear it. And I don't know what to do in that situation because I want to protect my kids. I live here. I can't move. This is our home, but on the other hand, like there's someone literally like 4 feet from this Rummy Cube game, like doing drugs. Actually, it's not just one person. It's many people doing drugs. So that's yesterday after we talked, and I told you a similar story about doing homework for my son last week. So it's like, ask me today, ask me tomorrow. It's going to be a different anecdote, but it's the same sort of in your face, impossible to ignore, ongoing trauma, sadness, sickness, human tragedy. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but it's like a nervous laugh, but it's just a lot. I think I don't know, I could go on and on, but at least stop there because I don't want to ramble.
Talk about the city's response in this case is that in mid-March, the city rolled the mobile command unit van onto 16th Street Plaza. I think it was March 12th or 13th, something like that. And people in the police department sent me the emails where they're soliciting officers to work overtime, and it's two a shift, and I'm told they're having trouble filling those shifts. And the number one directive in the emails is to keep the van from being vandalized. And I couldn't help but notice today that someone with a bright pink marker has written the word piss on the side of the mobile command unit. This is a bit on the nose juxtaposition to a story that you have, Al, because before there was a mobile command unit on 16th Street Plaza, there was a co-ban. We have H. Brown, an ardent supporter.
I'm the only one in the room that remembers it. Feinstein put it here in 1980.
So a co-ban was a Japanese innovation.
And it worked.
Several in one time. They were small hut-like features, and police would be stationed there. But Al, you told me that they had a design flaw.
Well, the design flaw was, we had it with 16th and 24th Street, and there was one in Chinatown and one up in Japantown. And what it was a little platform and you could sit, and it was the big window. And the door you came in from the back, but there was no way to look out the back. So while the officer was in there taking some type of report or talking to somebody or just being in there, people would urinate in the back, they graffiti, and it's just, and then when the officers weren't in there, then they take more advantage of it. So it was just an attraction, a nuisance attraction is what it became. And then we had them hauled out, and this was Dianne Feinstein time, and we had them hauled out. But the intent was the presence, and this is where, that's an example of the failure of designing retail and housing into that space. Had that occurred when the BART station was built, that would have been better. The school over here, where we had the navigation center for a while, that was supposed to be housing, but then it didn't. The fight went on and on about, I really don't remember the issue of why they didn't build the housing, but they built the navigation center. And people were brought to the navigation center, and they were interviewed. And some were declared, oh, we can't use you, so they just told them to go back outside. And the van would sometimes, I remember this one. We had a guy who was brought over from Portsmouth Square. That's Kearney and Jackson. He was brought over here to the navigation center. And they said, we don't accept him. And he was brought by the DPW, not the Department of Public Health people. So they put him back in the van, took him back over there and deposited him on the sidewalk. I mean, so again, it gets back to, are we gonna take some action via humanity? And again, we have to struggle with, can I take you off the street against your will? You don't wanna go. But you know what? I took a relative off the street years ago, he's now sober. But it took 7 days of keeping him in a room to try to finally his mind cleared. His mind cleared, then he was able to make a decision, and he went to the program. The program was good, it was an in-house program for 30 days, and he's been successful in Drive for 12 years now. Okay, that was a success. But trying to get him into a program, Salvation Army, all the other ones, nobody would take him, or they'd say, oh, we'll have an opening maybe in 6 weeks, or something like that. So we have to be able to clear their heads so that they can make a decision. And in essence, what we should be doing is protecting them. We should be doing it protecting them. When I first got to Mission Station in 1985, as a lieutenant, that it was up on the 1200 block of Valencia. And if you're familiar with it, it had a back where the back came in off of San Jose. And well, the big window there at the bottom where the wagon used to be was the lieutenant's office. And in different days, if you were a lieutenant on the swing shift, about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, you'd hear a knock on the window. And it was one of these street guys. And, can I come in? Tell the station keeper, we got another. They come in, so they have a safe place to sleep. We had a big cell. We can't do that nowadays. And then, if they really needed some help, we transfer them downtown. And they go up to the courtroom on the 6th floor, courtroom 20, and then they get 30 days, and they get cleaned up, and they did pretty good, and they looked good, and everything. But then they get out on the street, and again, they falter. So, they're society's victims, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Al, are we making, before the show started, you were talking about how 40 years ago, people were bemoaning many of the same things that they're bemoaning now. And it's not a perfect parallel, but have we made any progress? Have we figured anything out, or are we just repeating the things we did in the past?
A lot of it, I think we're repeating, but this is the first sign of optimism that I've seen in this new administration. What has really stood out to me was the new 4 deputy mayors, or whatever they're called before, because they have or policy director. Everything seems to be together in coordinating the departments, because the department coordination. I mean, sometimes I feel like we have more CEOs in the heads of the programs than we do homeless people, because things seem uncoordinated. But if you want to coordinate, you need to have up at top someplace all these services together. When you bring somebody in, they don't all have the same problem. They're on the street, but they don't all have the same problem. And you got to be able to deal with them, triage them, and get them to the right place with the right support. And you have to have the right support for them when they leave.
And you need plan A and plan B
And C.
and C.
Yeah, we need them all.
This
And
is
that-
something that has come up, is that you need to be able to have an overarching control, that if one person is getting a homeless person, they have to actually have control of the place where they go, and that wasn't the case in the past.
Right.
And now there's more cohesion there. That is happening in the background, but in the foreground, we see the flashing lights at 16th Street Plaza. Didn't see a whole lot of officers, and on my way here, it was very crowded in the alleyways, as you know all too well, Rob. And I'm wondering, what are people in the city telling you about what is the long-term plan here? They can't keep the mobile command unit here forever, and notoriously with this kind of policing, the moment you turn your back, things revert to where they were. What, certainly, this is something you probably brought up. What answers have you got?
I have asked that question to several people, and I get a consistent answer, which is good, but I don't think it's going to help move our conversation forward. The answer is until you stop asking me the question, that's when they'll know they can stop, I suppose. But then as soon as they stop, to your point, I think we're back here. So that's what I've heard. I want to also just pick up on what Al's saying too, because there is a change from what I've noticed with Lurie in office and the things he's done with the structure of the government. Because what I used to hear is, oh, well, that's another department's problem. We can do this much in this lane, but then we need to bring 3 other departments in, and there's no one to coordinate all that. It's expensive, and it'll take weeks to plan, and then it'll fall apart because someone's on, leave when it's planned to happen. So that doesn't seem to be happening. I do feel more coordination. I don't have like tangible evidence of it, but I can see the results on the street being a little bit better. And I know that there are actual like teams coordinating daily that they weren't coordinating before, and that's because of the coordination at the top. So that gives me some hope.
When you left Mission Station, are there things that you tried in the past that people aren't doing now? Or have we done everything we know how to do?
Well, what I tried here at Mission and in Tenderloin, I was also captain in Tenderloin, was something called adopt the block. What I wanted officers to do was each officer would adopt 2 blocks, a certain area, and it would be their job to check it out all the time. What I want to do is, if you, like say, Jimmy Jones, I want you to adopt 2 blocks in the district, and okay, 33 and 3400 blocks of Mission. So take a look at the block, and in your radio card, if you go by or whatever it is, and I want to know if the light's out, if there's garbage, there's something's been dumped, whatever, and you don't have to deal with it right there. Write it down on the 3x5 card and throw it in the captain's box in the morning, or the lieutenant's box or when you get it off. And then I would have the station duty guy in the morning. He would contact DPW, contact Department of Electricity, and say, we need this fixed, we need this tree trimmed, stuff like that. That was the purpose of Adopt the Block. In the Tenderloin, it was the beat officers adopting a much smaller area, more concentrated, but it was, I want you to get to know the people in the particular hotels, the single SROs. So get to know them, take care of them. I had, here at Mission, I had one of the best beat officers, Marco DeSangelis. He had 16th in Mission. And he was early morning, 6 a.m. He came out at a 6 o'clock lineup, and he came down to the donut shop next door to the plaza. The donut shop there on the north and south. I lost my north and south orientation.
I think it's now a restaurant.
Okay, no, but it was a donut shop. And a lot of these street guys were in there. Well, he would go around and take the medication, take their medication, do this, do that. And they were receiving substance from the city, money. And he came in and he had an idea. He said, look, these guys are all getting money from the city, and they're cashing their checks at the smoke shops and the liquor stores, and they're buying liquor and they're buying smokes, and he goes, why can't we get the checks and I'll open accounts at Mission National? He goes, I'll watch out for them, So we ran it up oh no, we don't want the police department to do anything with that. No, we don't want you managing anybody's money. Probably true, but we need somebody strong. And that's where we find the issues of private and public service. What can a private do? Anybody remember the Patrol Special Program?
Yeah, you killed them.
Yeah, huh?
I said, yeah, you killed them. There were 500 of them, there's 3 now.
No, they're all
The
gone.
union killed them.
0. There, a patrol special can do the things that the police department cannot do.
And let's
We-
explain what it is.
A patrol special is a police trained individual who's a private individual, approved by the police commission, and has training, stuff like that. So, we had a family property in the south of Market, and we had a patrol special that we paid every month. I think it was $85, and he would make passing calls, and he would do things. And you could call the police department and say, I'm gonna go on vacation, and you can have passing calls, right? You can say, I request passing calls. Basically, it's not gonna happen, because there's too much going on, and not enough officers. But with the patrol special, you give them your key, so you have the key. So we were on vacation, we went to Scottsdale, and there was a fire next door, and the fire department had to break our door to go in to the back so they could drag a hose through the hall and fight the fire from the back. Okay? The patrol special came, he was our agent, he made sure it got locked up. He called the plywood company, they put the plywood up, he made sure and notified us, and that's what happened. They can do a function that the police department cannot do. So, that's what.
This is something that you brought up when we spoke in the past, is that, we have a police presence at 16th and Mission, but it seems untenable that it will last too long because there is just a short count of police. There are fewer than 1,500 police, which is far fewer than we've had in past
Right.
eras. At some point, shows of force and attendance just can't last. It is a shame now that we don't have a program like that that would have served much of the function of what people need. But it's not just patrol specials. You mentioned ambassadors. How much of what people need can be fulfilled by somebody who is not an armed agent of the state?
Well, you think, right now we have ambassadors, both city ones and public ones, or private ones, that are patrolling. That's a visual presence on the street. Does anybody remember the senior escort program?
Of course.
Okay. Senior escort program had people who were not police officers, they were not armed, but they had mace or, and they had some training, and they were under the community services of the police department, which later became Project Safe. And it was a heavy presence here in the Mission, where they would walk seniors and other people with disabilities to go with them to go do their shopping, to escort them to their doctor's appointments or dental appointments, to have somebody that could take care of them too. So that is another, discussion that you can hear. Now that I'm infirmed, I'm getting to learn a lot about the medical profession. And one of the things is visiting nurses. Anybody let's see how many hands have experience with visiting nurses. Okay. That's a really hard job. You go into these apartment houses, you don't know what you're getting into. I think escorting the visiting nurses would be a great job for kids, say in the 16 to 18, 19-year-old group, because you would see them, this is a way for them to experience seniors, learn about life, and protection and responsibility and earn credits for college, make some money at the same time. I think that would probably be a good program to institute, bring the generations together. I think that would be something that I would really like to see. The high schools right now, Mission High and Balboa High, have a grade 13. What's grade 13? Wait a minute, Bernie, you know too much.
See,
Anybody know
freshman
grade-
in college, for God's sake.
No. Anybody know
Oh,
grade
really?
13? What is grade 13? Grade 13
McAteer.
is for people who are, or people that are between 18 and 21, right? 18, 21, who they're helping them look at different careers, the trades, public service. We're gonna have, I know Bernie here, and he's gonna be proctoring a group on April what?
29th at the Fire Museum.
At the Fire Museum out on Presidio Avenue. He's gonna proctor a group of them, I think. How many of them?
It was 24 students, 4 adults.
24 students, 4 adults.
And actually 2 blocks from here, Mission High School,
Yeah.
they have a fire academy working with the fire department to try and get a more diverse, more inclusive.
Get the kids involved.
Downtown front.
So, I want to ask you a difficult question, Rob, is how do you balance empathy with the people who are suffering outside your window with just the fact that this is no way to live for you? And what does success look like, in terms of the police or the city coming in and doing things here?
I think success relates back to what I said earlier about what was answered, the answers I get from the city, which is like, I don't wanna have to, I guess, I don't wanna have to be here doing this, right? I was at a meeting on Monday, met Lydia there. I spend a lot of my time now just working on trying to get the same baseline of safety and cleanliness that most of the other city enjoys, the rest of the city enjoys. I know there's places, but we are in the top tier of sort of these issues. So I would like to get to a point where I don't feel the need to file a 311 ticket multiple times a day, or call the non-emergency line, or make a website, form an alliance, meet the mayor. I mean, I've done so many things. I volunteered to clean the alley. That probably won't go away. I expect to really continue doing that. But anyway, I guess I'd just like to not be doing any of this, as much as you all are lovely and it's good to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts, and thanks for listening. But also, I'm sure that none of you, most of you probably don't want to be thinking about this problem either. So that's that. How do we balance it? I mean, honestly, we're not doing well. I don't want to be melodramatic about it, but we're really in kind of like a crisis as a family. I talk to neighbors; it's the same thing. I look out the window, I see elderly people pushing their walkers in the middle of the road because the sidewalk's blocked by people doing what they're doing. I see families doing this. I mean, everybody does that. If you go walk down the alleys over here, nobody's walking on the sidewalks because the sidewalks are full for the most part. So I'd like to be able to walk out my door and not have to explain to my kids what's going on, or have them, I'd like to actually say we're leaving the house and not have my kids say we don't want to leave because we're scared. I think that would be a good metric for success here. I'd like to walk out the house with them being unafraid, and for us not to have to encounter things we're not expecting. I know we live in a city, we live in the Mission, we chose to live here. We love, things about this neighborhood, but also we would like to have less of a lot of the things.
Well, if you have cards, you can always submit your questions as well. Al?
They're not distributing cards.
Oh, they're not?
We're here.
Okay. So,
I take mine.
okay, well, when did things become difficult at 16th and Mission? It was a very populous, thriving retail area, in the 50s and 60s. How long has 16th and Mission been a troubled spot, and what's new now?
I think, you know, the change has always occurred. I think the biggest change for 16th and Mission, was the BART station. To me, that's and what occurred with the building of BART and the ripping up the streets and how, that affected the businesses, and, you know, businesses fail as a result of BART. The streets were torn up for quite a long time. So, so that has an impact. So that, basically, once the station is finished, and the BART program, the BART started, that's now a new era. It's a new era, it's the timeline. And we got more people, population. It's no secret that we get a lot of people come from other areas when they hit the skids, and they get this. The actions we're taking here in San Francisco, here in the peninsula, the Pacifica is dealing with all the vans and the motorhomes. The Pacifica City Council last week voted to pay to rent space at the Francisco Trailer Park to allow people to put some vans on there to get them off the street, so that they can have hookups and toilets. And that's the big thing, is the facilities, the sanitation facilities. People need to be able to go to the bathroom. And that's real important. And we don't have enough of those facilities. And has anybody ever been to Amsterdam? And what do you remember about Amsterdam, about facilities? What do you remember? Anybody remember anything?
London, Paris, Casablanca, Istanbul, they all got toilets.
They actually have, you know, like urinals where you can see the top of your head, but you're doing your business, right? It's not a private, it's not everybody, it's really for safety.
You can see your legs too, from the waist up. It's in an Inspector Clouseau movie. There's a great one.
One of those at Dolores Park. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, that's something, but we don't have that citywide. So, again, that's fine.
At one point, the city was spending $65 million cleaning the street and $3 million on toilets.
Correct.
So, you know, that it is always more expensive to pay for things on the back end, no pun intended. But, what do you wish that we were doing that we haven't done yet? That's within the boundaries of the law.
Within the boundaries, I think is to coordinate the facility. I mean, I can't believe that it costs $1.5 million to put a bathroom up on Noe Valley on 24th Street. You know, let's have more facilities so that people, and I think that we need to utilize some of the spaces that we have for the ability, well, degree of homelessness. The people who are mentally ill and those who are under the influence can't get a job. But those are the ones that are the working homeless, the ones that are working. We should be helping them with storage. You gotta store your stuff. You gotta have a safe place to park. And you gotta be able to have a safe place to clean yourself up so you can go to work. And dressing. Not everybody ends up there because of their fault. It's you end up there because of circumstances. So if we as a society need to help others. But how strong are we gonna be with them? And the ones that are mentally ill, how do we treat them? And how do we take care of them? And because that's a lifelong, care program. The ones with substance abuse, how do we help them? How do we get them? We have a lot of success. There's the AA and different programs that have a success, but how do we get the ones that are on the street into those programs? Into those programs. And get them to stay there, help them and stay there. And then the ones that are working homeless, you know, so you got some of these limo drivers that are driving around in limos, they're living in their limos also. And they're trying to, you know, make a buck and stuff like that. So how do we do? And our financials are very difficult. You can't, I mean, you can't buy a house today. I mean, it's almost impossible to buy a house. I mean, I was able to purchase a house, and I was married. And my wife, you know, I'm embarrassed to say, we paid $43,000 for our house. $300 a month house payments. They were astronomical. You know, it seemed like that then, but now you look back, but what?
I think you guys have kind of hit upon it here, is that we are seeing overt drug use because people don't have a place to be. And if the problem is that problem can be solved more easily than improving people's lives. But, you know, as we mentioned, when you took people's tents away, people did stuff in open. And we don't see a lot of these problems in other parts of the country because people can afford to be housed. So that's some of it. Let me ask you about the 16th Street Alliance. We haven't talked about that yet. What is it and what is the purpose of it? What are the goals?
Yeah, the goals are simple. It's just safe streets, clean streets, and vibrant streets, to sum it up. And I think that, you know, there's not a leader of the 16th Street Alliance, and I'm not here to represent them at all, but I joined it because it's a group of, for those that don't know, it's a group of merchants, residents, and other organizations from Guerrero to South Van Ness, from 17th to 15th, so we're in the middle of it right now. And it's just people that kind of want all of those things. And we found through the few group meetings we had that it's really hard to agree on tactics, solutions. People have different ideas about what should be done or what shouldn't be done. And so we try to keep it very goal oriented around the things I mentioned: safe, clean, vibrant streets. And my personal opinion on this is that I'm not qualified to have any prescription to solve the problem. I would love to have the solution. I don't. And I'm grateful that some people are out there thinking about it. It's not my job. It's not something I have any training in doing. And so I try to just focus on the things I want for myself, what I want for my neighbors and for my kids and the rest of the community, which is just a thriving, safe place to be.
We've got some good questions here. Oftentimes we'll have bigger crowds, but we don't get good questions. And if I ever have to flip the card over, that's just too much, right? Someone has a really good question here about drug dealing and drug use and petty crime being old problems that are not unique to Mission and 16th. What is unique about San Francisco that makes this such an intractable problem?
We hand out money. We hand out money. And I'd rather give a person a lunch chip than give them cash. It goes back to what Marco was saying. We're giving them their money and they're cashing their checks at the liquor store. That's the issue. I'm familiar with it.
Not cash, wasn't it? Yeah, they took GA away.
$109.
That ain't,
It used to be a whopping $345.
yeah, but I mean,
That's not attractive.
so we gave them $109. I mean, I don't think that's the cause of it.
So,
I think cash,
Not much.
no, but it adds up. It adds up. And you know what? The drug dealers, they sell a lot of bunk. They sell a lot of them. I mean, I had drug dealers, quote, drug dealers in Dolores Park and in Alioto Park. And they were doing Huckley Buck, marijuana dealers.
You test
It
this.
wasn't marijuana.
Wasn't.
It was parsley and other, you know, stuff selling to people, and people were driving up, and our complaints came from the neighbors who said, hey, all these cars are driving up and these guys are running out from the park, handed them and coming. Wasn't even dope. It was, but the quality of life for those citizens in that area suffered as a result of that.
We have another policing question, which is, what is the purpose of the mobile command center when it is very close by, is open drug use on, it mentions Sweet Sally?
I think it's the show, the show of presence and force. That's what they do with, whether it's the Koban or the van, and it shows we're in the area. That's basically what you're doing. You're flying the flag.
Is that useful? Is there a use for this, or certainly
I
not in and of
think it's
itself?
psychological. It's basically, you're flying the flag. It's like putting a radio car at, I just make it up, St. Francis Yacht Club. There, you know, how you go in the back to the wave organ, you go drive all the way back. Well, you know, maybe there's gonna be problems or not, and they got a parking lot, and then there's another parking lot, but it's a peninsula. So you get a radio car, and you park it at the front end of there, and so bad guys think, oh, the cops must be in here someplace. You know, and there's only one way out and one way in. So it's a psychological ploy.
The question here also, this is a good one, how do you think this compares to the Tenderloin? Should or can this get pushed to the Tenderloin?
Well, that's the way it goes.
The Tenderloin was not a bad neighborhood at one time. It was actually fairly, when you go back to the 20s and 30s, and you look at the Tenderloin. And the Tenderloin sort of, and I was captain of the Tenderloin, and it kind of defaulted in there. The push, when the Moscone Center was built, it got even worse. And this has a lot to do with, when you move and displace, they go somewhere. And they're gonna move and displace and go somewhere else. Unless the optimism that exists today is we will have the right places to take them. Can we have the right services to get them off the street and maintain them off the street and make them productive members of society? Or functioning members of society. We have a lot, it's interesting because we had a guy on 6th Street who was out there, and an ambulance was picking him up, and the fire department was picking him up, and everything else. Well, a deep dive into him found out that he was from Minnesota. And he had a pension. And he had a health plan. And finally, we were able to locate his relatives in Minnesota. They came out to get him. He had disappeared, but he was not there. He didn't know where he was. If you told him he was in Chicago, he'd believe it. And you gotta dig into each one to find out what their case is. We got a guy, he's doing good because he's got a caretaker, and she takes care of him, and he lives in a caretaker down by the navigation center on the Embarcadero. But he has short-term memory. He looks good, his physical is good, but he has short-term memory. So if you sit down with him to have dinner, and you'll order, and then a few minutes into waiting for the order, he'll say, did we order? Yeah, well, what did I order? Oh, okay. You know, he's got no concept of that short-term memory. So he has to be helped and guided. So there's 3 restaurants right there near the navigation center. So his caretaker, she gives them a payment. I think she gives them $200 each a month or something. And he goes in and he orders his coffee and they tell him, oh, sign here, or his lunch. And she tells him what his dietary restrictions are. And so she's caring for him. And he's functioning. He takes his little walks, he does his thing, he talks to people, forgets what he said, and doesn't remember them. You know, everybody's, hi pal, hi ma'am, how are you doing? You know, but he's being taken care. If he didn't have that caretaker, he'd be out right on the street, disheveled.
So we are reaching the end of our hour here, and Mayor Larry has his 100-day mark on the 18th, which unfortunately is also the anniversary of the earthquake. And I'm hoping, if not 100 days, what can you realistically expect to see in 100 more days or 200 more days? What more than what you want to see? What do you expect to see? What can you convince yourself of?
Me and both of you. No.
I can convince myself of a lot of things. I've been told I'm overly optimistic about the situation, but I don't have a choice but to not be hopeful, or but to be hopeful. I mean, because I live here, this is my home. I don't want to root against Lori. I don't want to root against things that appear to be working, although I'm not blind to the fact that it takes sustained, ongoing something, some kind of program, sustained over time that hasn't obviously worked for decades and decades and decades. And so when I hear things like this, it's some truth serum for me, because it's like, okay, well, I guess things have always been this way, which feels, hard to hear. But like I said, I don't have a choice but to be optimistic. So I'm rooting for Lori. I feel like he's done more, in the last, I guess it's been almost 100 days now, than I saw previous, 4 years in the mission here, and to see it deteriorate. So I'm hopeful, but also realistic.
I'm rooting also, because I feel optimism that I've never felt before. I've seen attempts at doing things. I think their discussions are going in the right direction. They're having good discussions. Right now, so I'm also optimistic and hoping for the best. For me, for these guys, they got young kids. They're growing young kids. For me, I have grandchildren that are the age of their children. These guys, the age of my children, a little younger than my children. But that's the generations. 1, 2, and the ones that are alone, 3, and maybe 4. And what are we giving them? What are we giving them? I'm an example of what we have done it as a society. I need a lung transplant because I was poisoned by environmental poisoning. I'm a victim of the environment. So, what are we doing to help that? We fight about a lot of things, but we don't concentrate on what can we do to make it better together. And we can't just stand on one thing. We need to be holistic. That's my opinion. I'm not giving an opinion for the department because I'm retired. I'm not official in the department. But that's my experience. It's a my experience is a holistic experience. One of the reasons it was kind of selfish, one of the reasons I wanted to be at Mission Station, besides having a lot of relatives that I could go have dinner with, was that my daughter went to ICA. I could watch her. I could go to when the dances, my wife and I would go up and we would be the proctors or the chaperones, you know. She thanked us when she was in college and said, you know, it was nice to have you guys there, because I could say no when the guy said, well, hey, girls, let's go for a ride after the dance, you know, once they're out of the view and stuff like that. So that was different. So, but I do have a lot of optimism, and I want for you guys with your kids, to be able to have a good experience and not to be worried about them. I mean, you're gonna go through the teenage years, and it's gonna seem horrible, but they're not.
And it is horrible.
Speak for yourself.
But you come out
I
of
know,
it.
I know.
You come out of it.
Yeah, you come out of it. But you're gonna go through that. But what we worry about the most is one of our children gonna fall to the addiction? What are we worried about that? Of course we are. And that's what life is about. We're all working together to support each other. But these souls on the street, that's what they are, is the souls on the street. But they all have relatives.
They're
And
not the enemy.
you know,
They're not the enemy.
and
Just a-
you've got probably a couple more questions. You
Well,
passed
and
up.
this-
I think we're in a good spot right now. I appreciate everyone coming out here on a Thursday night. I'll stick around.
Folks, if you want to make a difference, demand a Coban back at admission in 16. There was nothing the matter. I taught special ed. I taught all the mission kids 30 years ago on Bernal Heights. The Coban worked fine. The problem was the Police Officers Association said it was too dangerous because the gangbangers shot holes in them. So they made a deal with Willie Brown and they canceled the Cobans in exchange for his endorsement. He killed him. Demand a Coban back at 16th and Mission. Takes 30 officers to run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The cops don't want to, there's nothing the matter with the cops. It's the leadership. It's the Police Officers Association. The job of a union is to give you the most money for the least work. And the cops here do the least work and they have the least exposure to danger. But when they have the least exposure to danger, we have the most. They're going to go away. I'm going to still live here and walk the streets here. The problem is the Police Officers Association. I've talked to hundreds of cops here. They would all like to walk foot patrols, and it's only the Police Officers Association that keeps them from doing that. Period. That's all it is. Don't take all the bullshit. They're short people because they want. Yeah. Sorry, Joe.
That'll do it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.